be hardly any architect in this world who do not know about this building. This is the story of Sydney Opera House, an iconic structure which sits on the water's edge and overlooks the famous harbour, a structure that represents Australia. Although it now appears to float effortlessly on water, this landmark structure required some extreme engineering to construct. Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you have watched our previous videos. If not, you can find them here. Today, we are deep diving into understanding the architecture marvel, the Sydney Opera House.
Sydney Opera House sails have been lit up.
Sydney, where the sails of the Opera House have been illuminated in...
Why on earth put opera in a thing like that? Terrific. Ugly.
Gee, it's beautiful. What is it? What do you think of it?
1973, the Sydney Opera House finally opened after running way over budget and schedule.
Designed by Pritzker Award-winning architect Jan Utzon, this masterpiece isn't just a building. It's a story of vision, persistence, and bit of an architecture wizardry. So let's get started. When we start our video, we always ask this question: why this building was built? So the question here today is why there was a need of an opera theatre. In the mid-20th century, Sydney was a growing cultural hub. The city needed a landmark, a place that could host performances and put Sydney on the global map. But what was the vision behind it? An opera house that would be as much a work of art as the performances inside it. Enter Bennelong Point, the site chosen for this ambitious project. Fun fact, before the Opera House, the site was home to a tram depot. Imagine telling those tram drivers that one day they would be sharing their workspace with Queen of England at an opera performance. In 1955, this man named Premier Joseph Cahill launched an international design competition for dedicated opera house. After reviewing 233 entries from architects representing 32 countries, the judges declared Danish architect Jan Utzon the winner of the competition in 1957. Although his entry was composed of basic sketches and diagrammatic drawings, after winning, Utzon began to refine the building's plan. The inspiration: Utzon's love for nature, particularly the sails of ship and the segments from an orange. That's right, folks. Next time you're peeling an orange, you are technically recreating Sydney Opera House. Sort of. Construction began in March 1959 on some 588 concrete piers to support the 1.8 hectare building. But it wasn't exactly smooth sailing. The project faced numerous engineering challenges, not to mention political and financial hurdles. To give just one example, the support column for the building's roof were installed before the roof itself have been designed. When the full extent of the roof structure was determined and finalized, the columns proved to be too weak to support it, resulting in all of them being taken out and replaced. The original budget of $7 million skyrocketed to $102 million by the time it was completed in 1973. Can you imagine being a project manager on this? Hey boss, guess what? We are just $95 million above the budget. Over 10,000 workers contributed to the construction with 1,056,000 roof tiles covering the iconic shells. These tiles were manufactured in Sweden, ensuring that they could withstand the harsh Australian climate. The roof tiles aren't just any ordinary tiles. They are made of glazed ceramic designed to be self-cleaning and to reflect the harsh Australian sunlight, creating a stunning play of light and shadows on the sails. Project was planned in 3 distinct stages. First would consist of structure's podium, the second would see the formation of iconic outer shells, and the final stage would focus on internal fit-outs of the concert hall and other open spaces. The Sydney Opera House iconic design posed a major challenge. In the elevation, the shells appeared to rise organically from the base, creating a sense of movement and fluidity. In this section, we see careful consideration of slightness and acoustics, with each shell acting as a separate module. The shell's design had no cost-effective construction method initially. No one at the time knew of a cost-effective way to construct these large, non-repetitive forms. In an effort to find an economical solution, the roof was redesigned at least 12 times. This project was one of the first to use computers to run structural analysis on the designs, allowing the project team to understand the complex forces that the roof shells would be subjected to. Eventually, a solution was reached that would see the curved roof shelf cast as sections of a single sphere. Rumor has it, Erzon himself came up with the solution while peeling an orange. By treating each cell as section of one sphere, arches of various lengths were able to cast in a single mold. Now the structure is so strong that it can withstand a tornado. Not that anyone would want to see it, but it can. In total, more than 2,400 precast ribs and 4,000 roof panels were manufactured this way in an on-site factory, avoiding the need to cast the shells in situ and high formwork costs this would have entailed. After installation, the roof structures were finished with white and cream tiles, giving it the appearance we see today. Construction of the sail-like structure that gives the Opera House its iconic shape made up the bulk of the project's second phase. Before we go back in time and talk about the history of the project, let's talk about the floor plan. The Sydney Opera House complex includes multiple performance venues. The Concert Hall with 2,679 seats, the Joan Sutherland Theatre with 1,507 seats, a Drama Theatre with 544 seats, the Playhouse with 398 seats, and the Erzon Room with 210 seats. The design cleverly separates these spaces, ensuring sound insulation and optimal acoustics. Now let me tell you the story of tragic departure of an architect from the project. As the construction progressed, Erzon relocated his office to Sydney in 1963. However, a change in government in 1965 placed the project under the Ministry of Public Works, leading to growing tensions. Erzon eventually left the project in 1966 with more than 100,000 Australian dollars owed to him in unpaid fees. We were unpaid back then and we are even unpaid now. Comment down and share your unpaid stories. But moving on. Despite protests to bring him back, he never returned to Australia or saw his project completed. After he was gone, the interior fit out saw several changes, with Major Hall becoming solely a concert venue and the Minor Hall, renamed the Joan Sutherland Theatre, hosting opera and ballet. Erzon's original acoustic and seating designs were altered, causing ongoing acoustic issues. After 14 years, the Sydney Opera House was officially opened by Queen Elizabeth II on October 20th, 1973, with Beethoven's Symphony No. 9 playing in the background. Erzon was not present nor mentioned during the ceremony. Such was the tragedy. But they say your destiny is written by God. Few decades later, after an official inauguration in 1990s, he was appointed as a design consultant. And then Erzon also received the highest architectural award, the Pritzker Prize, in 2003. So there you have it, folks. The Sydney Opera House is not just a building. It's a lesson for architects, students and dreamers everywhere that inspiration can come from unexpected places. We just need to have the right vision. Remember, next time you face a daunting project, just think about those concrete shells. Stay tuned for more architectural deep dives and do not forget to like, share and subscribe. Who knows, your next big idea is just around the corner. Bye.